Response video to Piro. This might be a long video, so the other parts will be on the Blip site, and I will keep the first part on YouTube. Alright, talking about animal rights. In a way, this argument gets framed the wrong way. I mean, we use animal rights to imply that the animals have rights as an expression of our responsibility to them. It's not like they can exercise their right. They can't. So, I mean, the word rights always gets complicated because I would argue that it's more a reflection of responsibility, that the white space of responsibility is the game, fulfilling responsibility. So it's more about what is our responsibility to the animal kingdom and to each other. The argument can be made is we do treat each other as if we were animals. Then again, how the only thing that matters is what we're defining as the value. What's the quanta of value here? And so for me, it's going to need to be reduced to that for a chart to mean anything. It has to have some sort of common. The numbers have to be equatable. There has to be a connection between velocity and mass and these different elements, and there's no definition of that relationship, no formula. And so without a formula, what are you going to do with a number? What are you going to do with a position? And whatever relative statements you're going to make here, they're on ambiguous and strange definitions. I mean, definitions I'm not going to find any use for. The whole concept that a plant is experiencing emotion is going to be there's no way I can interact with a chart that has that as a premise. That is complete nonsense, ludicrous. You might as well throw the word emotion in the toilet if your argument's going to be that plant knows what one is. I mean, that's sorry, but man, that's just so out there. And I'll argue that. So back to the quanta. It's got to be this quanta of life experience, let's say, if that's what we're arguing about. And so what about a quanta of life experience do these animals have? What is worth what? Again, we're back to this argument. It's not you're going to say that the mission is survival. Well, if that's your mission, fine. But that's, in my opinion, no. You can't call that. You can't define that or establish that logically as the mission. That's a DNA's contrived. That's built into the mechanism, but it has nothing to do with my intelligence. I mean, I can think of more important things than survival, and the important thing is that equation, that balance between these negative states of living experience and positive states of living experience, and that's the value. I wouldn't waste negative state. I wouldn't impose negative state on myself deliberately or willfully, recklessly, sloppily. So why would I not have that as the value here? Survival is just, it's almost meaningless in a world where there's no resource value to the creation of these organisms. If you can have, it's carrying capacity that's what matters. And so whether we live 40 days or 40 eons, you can make an argument that life, the qualitative experience gets better with knowledge, but that's a double-edged sword. So we need life experience for life to have value, qualitative value. But I think I would argue that most people might find the early years of their life, or their life as a youth, more rich than their years as a degrading and decomposing corpse, semi-corpse. So survival for what purpose, for what end? So again, this is just missing way too many elements for me to be able to find it useful. I mean, our ambitions are not, what we personally feel as an ambition. is not in it of itself an established, defined, universally approved, intellectually approved value. Because you want something doesn't mean what you want is a good. I mean, and this chart is assuming a lot, and it's assuming a lot about what humans want, and it's not, and so it's almost an insult to the very concept of animal rights, in that it's just establishing what is in. It's only based on what humans want to achieve. We dole out. We change the economics based on what humans want. That doesn't make any sense. An animal is an animal regardless of whether humans even exist. And it has meaning whether a human exists. And its consciousness has a substance whether a human exists. So, yeah, I just don't like the framing of the conversation. It's nice that you went to the trouble, made a chart and all that stuff, but I can't go anywhere with your definitions of what these things are and who's experiencing them.
Hello, my response is one, I'm correcting the table, which hopefully I will have the wisdom to use in the future. I've added a pain and suffering column, and I've improved the empathy column in that the question of when do animals feel empathy to me is in the emotions column, and I was intending to ask if they deserve empathy. I think the specific question of empathy as an emotion is very interesting. It can be and should be ranked itself. Each of these columns really is worthy of a debate in itself. Right?
Yeah, well, again, yeah, I just don't even see how these columns are going to help establish anything, because we don't even know what one is worth relative to the other. Whether something thinks doesn't, what's worth more, what it feels, or the fact that it has a capacity to scheme. I would argue that what it feels is more important than whether it can scheme. So I think the only way to get through this and to nail down what's important is to do those thought experiment type questions that you always want to break. But those are the only way to get to the answer to these questions. I mean, you have to ask yourself, what is valuable? And that's the question. So, and this isn't going to get there. I don't see how you can possibly rank value based on these definitions.
Indeed, subcategories within the columns probably also particular emotions, love, empathy. Suffering to me also an emotion, but I put it over there with pain in this new column.
Yeah, well, again, you say it's an emotion. Well, that's whatever. It's and then you're going to say, in another video, you talk about how the ambition is survival. That's the glory here. So it's all going to be based on what is more conducive to survivability. Survivability is the value. Where my obvious counter argument would be, no, it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. It's about the quality of the life experience being endured, and that the purpose of an intelligence would be to maximize the quality of the life experience being experienced. So if you're going to have a substance of life in a bowl, you're going to want to pick out all the bad little bits, the bits that are suffering, and you're going to want to maximize the bits that are in a qualitative state of either pursuing in a comfortable way or satisfied in a rich way, or by whatever your standard of necessity is here, of how complex the soap opera has to be. But you want to pick out the bad stories and keep the good stories. I mean, I don't know, there's no other way to say this, but there's got to be something more definitive about a value here than to say, well, we've established that a human surviving to be 85 years old is worth 1 million points, and a cockroach going ow before you step on it, finish crushing it, is worth 1 point. I mean, where can you go with this?
I basically feel that some sense of each of
Well, this is again, so all living things, the definition of a living thing is a reproducing piece of chemistry. Okay, the definition of a human being is we're so detached from that. I mean, I've never even contemplated myself as in those terms. I mean, I'm about what I feel, what I experience. I'm about what my consciousness is doing, not what I'm doing when I'm unconscious. Just because I'm breathing, who cares? I mean, this idea that we should place a value on our existence merely because we're existing. Well, that's nonsense. It's not about existing. If I take away, we call people brain dead. We call that being dead. Okay, when your heart's still beating and your brain is dead, we call that being brain dead, and we call that being dead. That's how we define your death. So I think this is useful.
Some of these things cease to be. The one exception to that is rights, which I think are an arbitrary human or even legal construct. And the concept of rights do not necessarily apply.
Right. So I don't know. You put things on the chart. You say they don't apply. I just again. The whole point of having a concept of animal rights is because there's people who think humans have a responsibility to animals, not to abuse them, not to use them in a negative, harmful, which maybe should be on the list, way. And the harm is usually going to be related to some sentient experience, some feeling experience. I mean, we usually don't establish harm on an animal based on, whether it lives 7 years or 10 years, because we sort of see them as replaceable, that the new one is just as good as the old model, that there's no reason to worry. You want the transition between new and old, not to, if that has a quantum of negative to it, every time you transition, you have a death and you have a birth, and these are somehow negative experiences, well then you can say that, yeah, there would be an efficiency in lengthening life so that you don't have as many transitions. Like if we were on a 40-day life cycle, there'd be a lot of transitioning from one consciousness to another personality or another consciousness. And if those transitions are understood to be expensive, then you'd want to lengthen the period of time they live. But you can't deny that the substance, which is just the experiencing consciousness, you seem to be talking as if there would be some benefit to beyond the transition expense to, living forever or something. And I think that's rather bogus.
Really, just as some humans can lose their rights, there are various reasons people may forfeit their rights. Now, in terms of emotions, I think it's up.
Yeah, well, see, even that could get you in trouble philosophically. It's not a matter of forfeiting rights in the absolute sense. It's that you, based on the social contract, you can forfeit a right, but by some absolute, you can't forfeit it. Wow, that was awful quick. 14 minutes. Anyway, this will take forever. All right, so this will be the YouTube part. The rest will be on Blip, and so far so bad.